Social Music Talk with Alex Cosper. Thanks for joining us again. Today, we look deeper into music as we do each week, and we're going to get deeper into the data side of things. But what I want to talk about first is music and how our guest has worked in music and has worked his way toward data science. And that's John Rosenfelder. Thanks for joining us today, John.
Pleasure to be with you.
A business intelligence analyst, right?
Mm-hmm. Close enough.
So we're going to talk about that and your background in music. You were at Island Def Jam Records.
Among others, yeah. That one was the largest or most recent in a way, but also worked in Disney Music Group and lots of labels before that, Geffen and DGC and so on.
Wow. So when did you start in the music industry?
In the mid-'80s.
Oh, I started in radio around the mid-'80s.
I started as a radio person. I was a college radio music director at Stony Brook University in New York,
That's
WUSB.
where Howie Klein went.
Mm-hmm. And we were FM by that time. Howie was in the WUSB AM period. And and I knew him from those days. He was the head of 415 Records.
Right, owner, and then he went on to become the president of Reprise Records and vice president of Warner Brothers Records in the 90s.
Yes, and my career after Stony Brook was as a promotion person in the college and underground part of the music business for many, many years.
Underground, so you promoted underground bands.
Yeah, and tried to make them overground and bring them to life, I guess.
And did you have any successful examples of that?
The biggest, most successful example has to be Nirvana.
Okay.
Plenty of others that made improvements and incremental improvements, hopefully on every one of them, but that was an avalanche.
I'm curious about that because I saw on your Facebook page the past week you with Danny Goldberg, who is the manager of Nirvana.
Right.
And he's doing a book signing party because he just put out a book about Nirvana, right?
Right. Serving the Servant, I think it's called. And I'm in that book, so I went to the party.
Wow. So tell us about how you made it in that book.
Well, I was the college and metal promotion person for DGC, which was Nirvana's label when Nevermind came out, and had some interesting stories and experiences that Danny wanted to share and use as examples of how they went from being not underground particularly, but an indie band and transitioned to a major label and, of course, had all this success.
They were on Sub Pop, which was considered indie back then, and
sure
the
was.
king of indie labels, as a matter of fact.
Yes, it was very popular, the Singles Club, and the whole culture of indie music in Seattle was really defined and enhanced and propagated by that company, mostly.
So you were based in L.A., but you were dealing with Nirvana, who were based in Seattle.
Yeah.
And in what capacity?
When I guess when they were thinking about coming to the label, we met with them and went to see them as a team. The promotion people from DGC were in Seattle to help launch another band on our label, the Posies. We all went to see Nirvana play a famous show at the Motorsports Garage together. They visited us in L.A. And then subsequently, when Nevermind came out, I was the person who took them to radio stations with help from other folks in the label. I was a relatively junior person, but...
What was funny is once Nirvana broke, they didn't do radio interviews. Say, like, I was programming Quad in Sacramento. They would not talk to someone in Sacramento, maybe in Seattle or L.A., key markets. But they were a group that stood out as one that didn't do typical radio interviews.
The leader of the group, Kurt Cobain, was certainly the person to be interviewed most of the time, and he may not have liked it that much.
That's what it seemed like. Like he sensed that radio interviews aren't always the deepest, and he seemed bored with those kind of questions.
Possibly. In my experience, he did at least 3 or 4 of them that I can think of, and he was enthusiastic about the radio stations I took him to, at least. So,
Would that be in Seattle?
yeah, in Seattle, we did a few with Susie Tennant, the local rep up there, and
Right.
one of those was a college station, KCMU, which became KEXP later, and others in LA, including KXLU at Loyola, which was the first spin of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Wow. Okay. I don't know if you just heard, but KLOS in Los Angeles just got sold to another company. So there goes another rocker that's going to disappear, probably.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. Maybe
Really?
not. Hopefully not. We don't know yet, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe you know more than I do.
No,
but
not really, not really. But 90s alternative rock seemed to be what was becoming the culmination of decades of rock popularity. It was all moving toward that alternative sound. But I think in the 2000s, either oversaturation or the combination of just too many choices caused alternative to kind of just disappear as a major force in music. What do you think?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, and since you mentioned my current work is in business intelligence, these all are examples of business intelligence, whether KLOS is going to continue as a rock station or when you talk about the demise or transformation of the alternative radio format, it expanded dramatically in the 90s in the wake of Nirvana and a lot of those groups' success.
No doubt.
But if you owned a radio station in the 2000s and you thought about how that audience or target demographic, right, might have moved on to different devices, different platforms, as we say now, and the potential to sell advertising to an audience on radio, listening to those FM frequencies, it might make sense to try a different format. These are all the things that are things we do every day as either business people or in our personal lives. We take in information and process it and sort of act on it, and that's
Well, that's what the radio biz is going through right now. Lots and lots of decision making because, it used to be the top radio stock went for $50 a share. Now it's less than $10 a share. It's like not the industry you would invest in if you were really serious about the future, unless it gets involved more deeply involved with tech, which it does. It kind of lags the tech industry. I think if radio had gotten together with Apple and those companies more in the early 90s or mid 90s and merged with it more, it wouldn't have been trampled and controlled by the tech industry, which is what it seems like is happening.
It's a gradual process, and none of us could have really predicted how things might have turned out or which companies to bet on and not.
That's true.
A name comes to mind as you said that, which was Real Networks, right? And wasn't that Mark Cuban's company, and wasn't he part of?
He had broadcast.com. I don't know the whole Mark Cuban story.
Right, but I think he was in that transformation of FM and that.
To
And
podcasting
programming
and streaming.
to streaming, and online ways of listening to music and talk shows and so forth.
Well, is that where you think the world is today, more of a streaming world? Or do you think, I know that the raw numbers say that a lot of people still listen to radio in their cars, like 260 million people, but it's usually for a reduced amount of time compared to the old days. It's like 20 minutes at a time. Whereas podcasting is more geared toward the targeted listener who wants to listen to something specific, not just something general. Tell us what your view is right now of where podcasting is today.
It's obviously enormously popular. It's growing in popularity. The idea of being able to listen to things on demand, and very similar to the college radio scene, how you could have programs that were very narrowly
Niche.
focused,
Yeah.
on a specific topic, are what are alive in the world of podcasting and streaming. Is that you can listen to or create a program of anything you want. You're not constrained by commercial concerns, and you can find an audience for it through the online search engines and social media and so forth, and you can promote yourself. It's these things all
It knocks down barriers of entry.
correct. I was going to say disrupted, that old
Yeah.
word.
Right. So tell us about what you're doing.
Well, what I did was I was uh, in one of these large companies doing underground music promotion or alternative music. And as these other channels became available, it became, and the price of entry changed. It became less profitable or sensible for those companies to invest in this sort of world. And I went from being a corporate promotion and artist development person to doing it on my own as an independent for many years. It took me a long time to think of what to do next. A lot of my friends went into real estate, other sorts of sales type jobs. You could almost say business to business relationship management if you wanted to be fancy. But I really loved music and the process and act of doing promotion. I felt I was good at it. I wanted to keep doing it. And the statistics say that most people who become independent or some sort of consultant keep doing what they had been doing previously. But in about 2007 or 8, I got this idea that blogging and microblogging, posting on Twitter and Facebook and so forth, were a similar sort of scene as this underground music and even specialty shows on college and AAA music stations. So I added that as a feature in my independent promotion arsenal, and it really created a bump in my business. And thanks to a friend of mine who I'd made along the way as a promotion person, Dan Patterson, who was with ABC News and had his own early podcast. He might even still be doing it, the Creepy Sleepy Radio Hour or something like that. He really was very forceful as far as me starting my own blog and putting my voice out onto the net as far as being one of these folks too and transitioning into the data and tech world, let's say. And it really made a difference. I felt I was had the writing ability and had an opinion about music and experiences that were worth sharing, thanks to my friend, and was offered a job back in one of these major labels in about 2007. I wouldn't do it because they wouldn't let me be a tech person or work the digital world at all. So at that point, it's almost like I burned the boats and decided to go full bore tech. I had another friend, Andy Flynn from South by Southwest, who would sometimes give me a comp pass to the conference. It's really nice, by the way, to be interviewed by you as one of the radio people I used to know in that old world. And like these other guys, took care of me in a way. And I said, I want to go to the South by Southwest Interactive Conference. And when I was at that, it was amazing to me how there were young people walking around in sneakers and T-shirts with expense accounts, going to parties that had ice sculptures, and all the sort of fun and money and energy that I had experienced in the music biz in this sort of underground new artist realm had kind of moved over into this tech region. And I said, I got to try and do that. I got to follow the ice sculptures, basically.